on today's episode, we have our week 1 preview. We're highlighting our 3 favorite fantasy football matches. We're going through some of our favorite starts of the week. We're going to tell you guys to sit this week. We're starting with our favorite fantasy matchups. These are matchups that we would like to prioritize this weekend. If you have any excruciating flex decisions, pick guys that are playing in this matchup because a lot of guys are projected to go off. Kicking things off this week with his favorite matchup. Keegan, why don't you get things started?
So we're going to start with what should be one of the highest scoring games of the weekend and the projected highest total on the weekend of the Miami Dolphins at Los Angeles Chargers this weekend with a point total of 50.5 points or 51, depending on the book that you're looking at. Chargers -3. A couple things that are super intriguing to me about this matchup is one, we're going to see new Kellen Moore installed offense, right? And we will get a good look at what the Chargers will be like under Kellen Moore in that offense. I kind of expect the Chargers to drive the pace of this matchup. The Dolphins weren't necessarily a high pace team last year, but they were certainly explosive. You know, they did rank both top 5 in both explosive play and situational neutral pass rates last year, but they also ranked 31st in average play clock seconds remaining. A lot of pre-snap motion for them, so they can kind of slog down that play clock. But I expect the both of them to kind of get into a shootout, especially as the Dolphins will have to keep up with the Chargers and their pace of play, which ranked very, very high last year. A couple things. The Dolphins last year, 31st in fantasy points allowed to opposing QBs last year. So I'm thinking wheels up for Mr. Herbert. They also ranked 28th in pass yards per game, and they won't have Jalen Ramsey and also 2 other cornerbacks to be missing. Miami, also 6th worst team in allowing fantasy points in terms of receiving in 2022. So a lot of kind of holes in the Dolphins defense. We'll see if Vic Fangio can come in and kind of install something new here with the Dolphins. But, going off of last year, I think it'll be very interesting to watch how Herbert and his wide receivers play against this Dolphins defense that is pretty banged up. Another interesting thing I'm watching on the other side of the ball is the Dolphins play action game. The Dolphins are actually about first in the league, or close to first in the league in running play action plays, or they're actually first in total yards from play action plays in 2022. And the Chargers actually allowed the league's least amount of, or not least amount, but they were towards the bottom of the league. They were 6th best team in allowing PPR points from receptions and play action. So I think that'll be one very interesting thing to watch for in that match. Another thing on the Dolphins end is we know that Mike McDaniels loves that kind of outside run zone scheme, right? The Chargers were terrible on defense last year against the run game. 5th most rushing yards per game against last year. They averaged 5.6 yards a carry against them, which is pretty brutal. And again, mentioning that outside zone run schemes, they allowed the 3rd most yards against those outside zone schemes. So a lot of interesting tidbits from this game. I think what we're expecting here is a shootout. Just thinking of the matchups, I think wheels up for Herbert, wheels up for the wide receivers for sure. On the Dolphin side of things, I think for them to get going, it'll be important that run game plays really well. I think Raheem Mostert is in line for a pretty good week as well. Now, the Chargers are a lot healthier than they were last year, so it'll be interesting. Again, this is all speculation on stats last year, but a couple key things that I'm definitely really, really interested in. The last thing is the yards after catch potential. I think of the Dolphins offense when we think of Tyreek Hill and Waddle. That is another thing that I'll be watching closely for sure, because the Chargers allowed the league's least amount of yards after catch actually last year, and the Dolphins are about middle, but they had the 14th most yards after catch last year in the NFL. So a couple cool things there that I'll be looking out for. We've got the outside run zone scheme at play with the Dolphins, and can they take advantage of a pretty porous run defense from the Chargers, and can the Chargers kind of contain that Dolphins pass game? Remember, Chargers are one of the teams that kind of laid the blueprint for them last year and helped slow down the Dolphins passing game towards the end of the year. So a lot of interesting things to watch, but I think it's going to be a shootout. I think a lot of these players are must starts. You start Waddle, you start Hill. I think you start Mostert. Tua is a fine play. You definitely start Keenan. You start Mike. You start Eckler. And you start Herbert. This could be one of the matchups with some of the most startable fantasy players in it. So I'm actually really, really excited for this. This should be one of the better ones on Sunday.
I am all aboard watching this game and playing it in a domed environment. This game is indoors. It'll be a road game for the for the Dolphins. I'm sure they're going to travel pretty well, and we know the Chargers have like hundreds of fans, so a big fan base.
They might be
out
up to
there.
1,000. They might be up to 1,000.
Thousands. Sorry, Shane. Shane is a friend of the pod. Loves the Chargers. Go Chargers. We're rooting for the Chargers to win.
Go Chargers.
At the hundreds and masses of Chargers fans out there. I love this matchup. We're going to hear a little bit more about Raheem Mostert later on from me.
Teaser.
We're going to be talking a little Raheem Mostert talk. But I like this matchup. Vegas is going to take this up to 50 points. Hopefully we get a shootout. The last time these teams played, it was kind of a weird primetime game. Hopefully we get one of those classic shootout environments. And I think this is a great one to highlight. My matchup of the week here for fantasy purposes, I don't know how good the actual football is going to be, is the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts. So we're going a wonky AFC South showdown. The over-under on this game is 45.5. It opened at 43.5, so this line has gone up 2 points from a ton of juice coming on the over. The Jags are 5-point favorite. When we're looking at neutral pace for the Jacksonville Jaguars, coming out of their bye week in Week 11, they produced the 6th most combined snaps, and this was without Calvin Ridley, and they were top 10 in both neutral pace and neutral pass rate. So essentially, they're going to throw the ball, and they're going to run it fast, and they're going to play fast, which creates really ideal environments for offense and for fantasy. In the preseason, the Colts actually snapped the ball with an average of 12.1 seconds still on the play clock, which would have led the NFL in 2022. So you have two teams here that look like they're going to want to play fast. On the defensive side of things, the Jaguars surrendered the 3rd most rushing yards to quarterbacks last season. They surrendered the 5th most fantasy points to the read option last season. They surrendered the 4th most fantasy points per game to QBs under pressure last season. In college, Anthony Richardson had by far and away the best pressure to sack percentage of all the Power 5 QBs. And we've already seen that ability to escape pressure translate in the preseason. I think the Colts are going to feature Anthony Richardson a ton in the designed run game, and it's a plus matchup against this Jaguars defense, and I think his escapability and his scramble ability is going to pay dividends for fantasy. And to top things all off, the Jags have a bottom 3rd PFF graded pass coverage unit. The Colts had the 8th highest percentage of yards to come on explosive runs, and the Jags had the 3rd highest percentage of yards to come on explosive runs. The Colts surrendered the 4th most yak per reception, and the Jaguars averaged the 8th most yak per reception. The Colts were actually pretty solid last year against wide receivers, but Stephon Gilmore is on the Cowboys. Isaiah Rodgers is suspended. Their secondary looks vulnerable. Have you guys seen who's starting in the Colts secondary? They have a undrafted year 2 corner in Darrell Baker Jr. They have a rookie in Juju Brents. They have an undrafted rookie safety in Trevor Denbow and Julian Blackman. That's the
Who's
secondary.
Their slot corner?
I don't know who the slot corner is, but
He's good.
That's who they're running out this week, and that's who Calvin Ridley is facing off against. Again,
It sounded like 2 truths and a lie.
Darrell Baker Jr.
Kenny Moore's still good.
Brents.
Kenny Moore's still good in the slot.
Okay, so Kenny Moore is the slot guy.
He's their lone soldier out there trying to guard all 4 guys, probably. Yeah,
so maybe downgrade Christian Kirk. I don't know, but Calvin Ridley, Evan
Yeah,
Ingram,
that's fair.
Travis
That's
Etienne.
fair.
Again, like they gave up the 8th most percentage of their rushing yards to explosive runs last season, and the Jaguars have one of the most explosive run games in football with Travis Etienne. It's like strength versus weakness here that really sets up well. And also, something that's really interesting, in 2022, the Colts gave up the 6th most fantasy points per game when playing in a dome versus the 28th most fantasy points per game in outdoor environments. So this team gets gashed when they play
For
at home
the culture.
in a dome. So the way that I envision this game is Anthony Richardson's going to struggle early. The Jaguars are going to go up like 14 points, maybe 17 points. And then essentially it's just garbage time, catch up, tons of plays, tons of pace. You look up, Anthony Richardson gets to 20 fantasy points on volume, and the Jaguars just go crazy. So I think there's going to be a shit ton of points in this one. I think there's going to be a ton of garbage time in this one. I think this one's going to be a ton of fun. Start Calvin Ridley, of course, if you have him. Christian Kirk. I like Evan Ingram in this matchup. Travis Etienne as a plus matchup. And again, I don't really want to start Michael Pittman, but that Jaguars defense and that secondary is not very good. And they gave up a ton of fantasy points to wide receivers. So Michael Pittman's in play, and I really like Anthony Richardson this week. A lot of people that drafted Richardson are going to be a little hesitant to start him week 1. I like this matchup for him. So that's what I think about this matchup in particular. Any thoughts before we move over to Aidan's favorite matchup?
I will also be starting Anthony Richardson week 1. I am not afraid. I'm going to go into week 1 pretty confident that at the end of that game, it'll probably be a significant Jaguars lead, and I'll be banking on some Anthony Richardson garbage time points. But I'm actually just excited to see Anthony Richardson play. It'll be cool to see Trevor again in that second year of this offense. Then pretty interesting to see how this Colts RB room shakes out without Jonathan Taylor in the mix. We're probably going to get some Deion Jackson, some Evan Hull, a lot of Anthony Richardson. It'll be something to watch for sure. It might not be fun, but it'll be something to watch.
Yeah, we're going to get some answers. We kind of know what we're getting from the Jaguars offense, but I think for the Colts offense, we've got a ton of questions, and we're going to start to get some answers early, which I'm super excited for.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird line too, because you'd think they'd be
It's a little
favored
ratty.
more.
It's a little ratty.
You think they'd be favored a little more. I don't think the Colts have again, we just listed off their secondary. You think they'd be favored a little bit more. Weird, wacky game. I'm going with Richardson.
It's week
in this one.
one.
I feel good about it, and it's a AFC South division game. Like, never bet those games. Those games are just terrible. Okay, Aiden, what is your favorite matchup of week 1 for fantasy?
So we're staying in the dome. We are staying in the dome. We are indoors, air conditioned, and we are nice and cool. We are up north here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are visiting the Minnesota Vikings at the 10 a.m. slate. The Vikings are looking at a current 5-point favorite with an over-under of roughly 45.5, again, depending on what book you're at. This is the 3rd highest total of the morning slate and the 5th highest total of the weekend. So Vegas is pretty much telling us this is going to be a good one. There's a lot of players in play here. There's one really good offense. There's one offense where we really don't know much about, but I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. Just for starters, we've got our Dome Bro captain, Justin Jefferson, in his first game of the season. The consensus 1-1 in the Dome, JA next to him. We're excited for him. C on his heart. We're fired up. Just looking at the Vikings offense, they're coming off a season where they lit it up. There's kind of no way around it, especially in the passing game. They threw just shy of 40 times a game, which was 4th in the National Football League for just under 270 yards a game. Put it all together, and they were the 8th highest scoring offense in the NFL. You figure this number is probably going to be pretty similar this year. The defense didn't do itself a ton of favors, and the offense is probably about the same. You get JA in replace for Thielen. Obviously, Cook is gone, and you've got Madison, which is an obvious downgrade. But you look at that offense, and you're probably projecting a top 10 offense again, which is awesome. Given the amount of times they play in a dome and favorable conditions, you're fired up. And then you look at this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense that comes to town. There's some pretty favorable matchups here. Last year, if you look at it, they gave up the 7th most amount of fantasy points to wide receivers and the 8th amount of points to tight ends. So if you're a Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson owner, you've got to be licking your chops. This is a pretty favorable matchup in week 1. If they're on your roster, they are in your lineup. It's kind of no ands, ifs, or buts. They are in your lineup as they're probably going to feast again. This is a very similar defense that Tampa Bay rolled out last year, and you should start them with confidence. On the other hand, the rush defense, was a bit stingier. They were 27th against the run last year. You've got the big boys like Vita VA up front. You've got a pretty nice linebacker core, which in my opinion spells a bit of trouble for Alexander Madison, a guy that...
No way. You're not starting Madison this week?
I've been verbally out on Madison. I'm not going to get too into Alexander Madison, but it's worth noting.
Not physically, but verbally.
This was a very good rush defense last year. I think the Minnesota pass catchers are going to eat a very healthy plate this weekend. But I think the running backs, temper your expectations. I think it's a bit trickier there. That's Minnesota. And I think going to the other side of the football, I think Tampa Bay has kind of been just casted off all summer by the entire fantasy community. And I think we're going to see a bit more juice than we've all kind of given them credit for. especially when you're looking at how bad this Minnesota defense was last year. Let me tell you guys how bad that was. When you look at fantasy points by position, it was 10th most to running backs, second most to wide receivers. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, I'm looking at you. That's you guys right there. And 15 most to tight ends. So maybe the Kate Otton's hype train is on pause for now. This wasn't a great defense from Minnesota last year. They weren't great. We saw that. They were in consistent one-score games. They were consistently playing in comebacks. This is not a good defense. Like no one's getting younger there. Zadarius Smith is gone. Like that defense didn't get any better. And we've heard the buzz at the end of preseason out of Tampa Bay and that offense, especially in that final preseason game, was like, this offense kind of looks sharp. Baker's kind of commanding that offense. I think they're going to surprise people. Like I'd still lean Vikings here, obviously, but this is going to be a game of two offense absolutely duking it out. I think Rachaad White is going to eat a pretty healthy plate himself. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin should be in your lineup, absolutely. And this is going to be a good one. I think the guys that you drafted in both of these offenses should absolutely be in your lineup. We're looking at, first of all, you're in a dome. So, check one, like on my checklist. If you're in a dome, check number one. We're in a dome. That's awesome. And then you got two bad offenses and skill players on both sides of the ball that are studs. So I'm excited for this one. I don't think this one's getting quite as much hype, just given it's the Buccaneers. And we're like, dude, Buccaneers, whatever. This one's going to be sneaky, though. I think we're going to have some high scores. Like, this could be one of those Mike Evans games where he gives you 30 and be like, yep, like, that's not a total surprise.
The Baker-Mike Evans connection, I guess, has just been scintillating coming out of beat reports. That's just been taking over Tampa Bay, much like no, I'm not going to make a Ron DeSantis joke, but yes.
I didn't know where you're going with that. I just let you take the wheel. I let you take the wheel.
I love this matchup. Doesn't this matchup have Scott Hansen witching hour written all over it, where it's like, guys, you won't believe what Baker Mayfield just did, and you're like, what the fuck? And like the Bucks go into into Minnesota and beat them, and everyone's like, are the Bucks legit? And then they lose 6 in a row. And it's like one of those games where you wouldn't be shocked if that happened.
Touchdown.
I know it's going to be a weird game.
He's done that before. Kate Otton had a walk-off tutty last year against the Rams. Come on now.
Things are going to get weird.
Winner.
Things are going to get weird.
It is going to weird. We have no idea what the Bucs offense is going to look like with Dave Canellis, who's coming over from Seattle. So we don't really know what they're going to run, or it's kind of a mystery. And then we just know the Vikings are going to play super fast. They're going to throw the rock a ton. So I think that's a great matchup. What's funny is I have 3 of my 4 starts are coming from all of these matchups, so that is fantastic. If you had to pick one of the 3, what do you think is the best matchup for fantasy? Which one yields the most points?
Chargers Dolphins.
I'd go Chargers Dolphins. I think you need to look at the total alone. Like 51, or I saw it at 51.5 earlier today. I think Keegan said 50.5.
I did my note. It was about 50.5, 51.
It depends on where you're looking. At the book you're looking at, I think in terms of total points, you're looking at pretty much 5 more than every other matchup. In Vegas, they could be wrong. Week 1 is always wonky, obviously. They're completely brand new teams. But Vegas is trying to tell us, this is going to be the most entertaining game in terms of offensive output. So I'm going with Chargers Dolphins. I think draft capital, too. You've got so many guys in the first, second, third round of that game that I'm absolutely glued to the TV. That's on the quad box, and it's kind of non-negotiable this Sunday.
My thing with that matchup is we know for a fact both of those offenses are going to be good, right? We feel good about Kellen Moore. We feel good about Mike McDaniel. We feel good about the 2 quarterbacks. But the defenses might be legit too, which is something that I think could suppress the overall output of fantasy points.
The Dolphins, though, they're down 3 starting corners. And,
it's a problem.
Yeah.
The 2 cornerbacks that they're left are Xavier Howard and Eli Apple. Those are the 2 outside corners that will be playing. And it doesn't look very good for them, especially having to go up with Kellen, or the Kellen Moore offense, but it's Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett probably could have a sneaky day. Then you enter in Josh Palmer, and what if QJ pops off? oh, you got to deal with Austin Eckler. I mean,
Yeah.
Xavier
Eckler.
Howard was first in yards allowed last year, and Eli Apple was like seventh, dude. Like,
I think Trevor Lawrence might throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns against that Colts secondary. I can't shake how garbage that game is about to be for points, though. It's such a sneaky fantasy matchup that no one's going to talk about because we have no idea if Anthony Richardson's going to throw 4 interceptions or not. But
Yeah.
do not.
I don't know if
sleep
I'm
on
starting
that
him yet.
matchup.
There, I said it. I'm just hand up. I'll be honest. This is a trust tree for the mean team. I don't know if I'm starting him yet.
The Colts' third most rushing yards to QB last season, fifth most fantasy points to the read option, fourth most fantasy points per game to QBs under pressure. So
My QB start of the week is actually who I'm weighing against Anthony Richardson in my other league.
okay.
I don't know who I'm going yet.
Okay.
yet.
Okay. Well, we're gonna get to starts of the week here, and I think I just said the Colts. I meant the Jags. I'm sorry. I was a mess confusing the Jags and the Colts during that segment. Okay, transitioning over to starts and sits of the week. Truly transformational stuff here. You've probably never seen a podcast do it. We're gonna give guys that we want to play this week, and then we're gonna give guys that we don't want to play at each perspective position. This is the first time Aidan's ever done something like this before, ever read something like this before. So this is really groundbreaking stuff here for our newbie for the in-season content. So speaking of Aidan, let's kick things off with quarterback. Why don't you tell us the guy that you're most confident in starting this week?
Let's do it. So, like I mentioned, we've already said it pretty much all summer. When you draft Anthony Richardson, you need an emergency plan. And this was, my opinion, the best one. And he's got an awesome matchup week 1 that is none other than Geno Smith. I am
that's my
fired
start of the week
up
too.
about Geno Smith. It just feels like no one loves Geno when it doesn't really make sense. You know, coming off a QB5 finish, the dude averaged just over 18 points a game in his 2 matchups against the Rams. It was nothing groundbreaking, but you get 18 plus from your quarterback, you're feeling pretty good. You know, that floor feels safe to me. And this Rams defense only got worse. I'd be shocked, depending on your league scoring, if you're not getting 20 plus from Geno this week. Again, like going back to one of the points Shaun made earlier, division matchups are wonky, and I get that. But the Rams are one step behind the Cardinals in terms of like blatantly tanking. Like, this is a bad roster on both sides of the football team. And I don't see this one being very close. I could easily see this one being a 10-plus point game in favor of the Seahawks. And that Seahawks offense is awesome, dude. With their 3-headed wide receiver monster and the 2-headed backfield, like, I don't know. I just don't see how they put up a ton of a fight. Geno's safe, man. And he's probably around QB 12, 13 this week in rankings. Like, no way. I think he finishes around QB 6 or 7 this week. So I'm a big Geno guy. That is my start at the QB position.
Little nugget on the Rams defense that I saw when I was reading some Hayden Wing stuff. They only have one player on defense who is a first or second round draft pick. And it's Aaron Donald.
One?
We'll have one player on their defense who is a first or second round talent, and it's Aaron Donald. I mean, it is one of the youngest rosters in the NFL.
For sure.
Geno Smith. We saw what Geno Smith was last year. Like, I mean, on our last pod, I told you JSN was going to get 1,000 receiving yards this year. I have Geno Smith as who I think is startable this week as well, or somebody you should be considering starting. Because Geno Smith is like right outside that range of like quarterbacks that you drafted, like knowing you want to start. Like, he's not Herbert, he's not Burrow, like he's not one of the Russian guys. And you're probably sitting there like, Geno or Kirk, or like Geno or Aaron Rodgers. Like, I think Geno is a smash start this week.
Yep.
No, yeah, that's a great call out. My start of the week is actually Anthony Richardson. I'm planting my flag. I'm very on brand. I think he's gonna play and play well. I don't think it's gonna look pretty, but when you look up, it's gonna say 20 fantasy points. That's what it's gonna say.
That's all we care about at the end of the day.
I think the Jaguars defense is really bad at stopping the run. I think the pace and garbage time is gonna open up a lot of opportunities for Richardson. And they take a bunch of deep shots. Maybe scores a rushing touchdown off the tush push. I feel good about him getting there. Again, I don't care what his EPA per play or what his completion percentage over expected looks like at the end of the day. I want fantasy points. And if he runs over 8+ times in this game, I think he's going to be able to beat his projection and be a top 12 play this week. So I'm in on Anthony Richardson this week. transitioning to guys that I am not starting or a guy that I would sit this week. I'm not going to play Deshaun Watson if I had him this week. I'm not going to play Deshaun Watson if I had him this week. Okay, so here's the breakdown here. Cincinnati surrendered the second most points to QBs last season. So Cincinnati had a pretty stingy defense. There's been some turnover. Von Bell's gone. Jesse Bates is gone. So maybe that doesn't hold up year over year. But the last time we saw Watson, he was pretty bad in 6 starts. Let him have a good game before you put him in the lineup. Like, let him go out there and prove that he can score 25 fantasy points. It's too risky in my opinion. Now, he could score a lot of points running the ball, so that there's always that inherent risk. But I honestly would rather play Anthony Richardson over Deshaun Watson this week. Might sound crazy. This might be getting clipped and then sent to Milk Was a Bad Choice when we record Sunday evening. But I would rather just have Deshaun Watson ride the pine this week for my team. Aidan, is that why you'd want to sit him?
Yeah, I'm with you there. The Cincinnati defense was pretty stingy. Like you mentioned, they did have a couple losses, but it's not like Deshaun Watson is like, riding a hot streak off of last season or the preseason to where like I'm very confident in him. And you didn't draft him all that high. If you drafted Deshaun, you're almost at the point where Anthony Richardson, where you probably have an insurance plan. You probably have a Geno Smith, or you might have played Jared Goff tonight. Like, we're going to get to it more and more, but there's multiple guys on my starts and sits, mostly sits, where I'm like, I need to wait and see. Like, I need to see. We've heard so much throughout the summer that, like, this Cleveland offense, they've completely rebranded their offense around Deshaun. It's going to be different. We're going to see Houston Deshaun. And I'm not ready to believe that. And for that reason, I just think it's a tough matchup. Toss in that it's a divisional matchup, too. We're going to get back to it again. Dude, wonky stuff happens. Like, I could see this potentially being a low-scoring game. Like, things get weird with divisional matchup, especially in AFC North. Like, that division, they beat the shit out of each other. It is a lot of grinding matchups. So, no, I'm not playing Deshaun Watson under any chance, but I'm also not rostering him, so I don't have to make the decision.
Keegan, who are you sitting this week?
Following that same theme of like, just wait and see. Just wait and see on Russell Wilson. People are going to look at the matchup and they're going to think like Raiders, like the Raiders have had bad vibes all off season. Like, let's not forget, like Josh McDaniels might be a weirdo, but he's a good coach. And they have some pretty good players on the defensive side of the ball. There's definitely holes in it, but like Max Crosby is going to cause problems for them. I like Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech, like just an athletic phenom. Marcus Peters, there's good players on that defense. And no Jerry Jeudy this week. You have a Javonte who's likely still getting ramped up. Sean Payton will most likely try to reel this offense in as he's getting control and like implementing what he wants to do with this offense. So like kind of how you're saying with Deshaun Watson, like last year, Russell Wilson was not great. Now that could have been an offensive scheme. It could have just been a bad down year for Russ. I mean, this is a guy who is a perennial top option at the fantasy position. And I actually like him to bounce back this year, but let's just wait and see. Russ is also probably drafted in that territory where you probably took 2 quarterbacks. You probably took a Geno, or you probably took somebody else to go with them, like an Aaron Rodgers. Like, just wait and see on Russell Wilson this week. Like, don't overthink it. I don't think it's a really good matchup. Cortland Sutton's going to be wide receiver 1 this week. Marvin Mims will be out there a bit. Greg Dulcich, of course, our guy. But I just think it's going to be a very balanced approach. And again, this is just a wait and see moment. Like I said, I think it's best to just like bench him for now, see how he does. And if you miss out on it, great. Now you realize like Russell might be back. And if you do start him, or I mean, if you also miss out and you don't start him, he plays bad, like great, you also avoided a Russell Wilson disaster. So just give it a week.
Yeah, I'd give it a week on pretty much that whole entire offense. I think you're probably rolling out Cortland Sutton, but that whole offense is kind of in wait and see mode, in my opinion, especially with those running backs, unless you went like 0 and half to start one of them.
Yeah.
But I am very intrigued to see what Sean Payton is cooking up. I've heard that our Dulcich shares aren't left for dead, fellas. Peter Schrager on the Bill Simmons podcast was talking about how much Sean Payton loves Greg Dulcich. So
we might be back.
We might be so back. It's ridiculous.
Is Greg
transitioning here to running backs. Aidan, why don't you tell us your favorite start of the week at running back?
I've got a bonus. We call this a BOGO play. This is a 2-for-1 BOGO play. You buy one, you get one free from the big lefty himself. I'm starting both of them. I'm starting Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. I'm starting both.
Whoa.
The entire Washington backfield is in play this week. This Cardinals defense last year was already a bottom 5 unit against the rushing attack. And let me tell you what, things got worse this summer. This defense is going to stink. Given their different skill sets, I think they can both easily finish as top 24 running backs this year. Or not this year, this week as running back 2s. Given Antonio Gibson is probably more of your PPR volume, Brian Robinson is more of your goal line back. They're going to embarrass them. I don't know how else to put it. I think it's going to be potentially ugly.
Plant.
I think it's going to be potentially ugly. And I think Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson are both playable. Not like we saw tonight where like the running backfields were like totally convoluted and messed up. I think Bieniemy is going to actually play his cards right. He's going to pull all the right levers. And in my opinion, both of these guys are startable players this week. Talk about like the cushiest matchup to start the year for this backfield that we've all been trying to figure out. Guess what? You don't have to figure it out. You play them both. So that's a BOGO. That's my play for week 1.
That is crazy. You did a buy one get one, and you basically said that the Commanders are going to embarrass them. This is I'm already going to cue this up for Milk Was a Bad Choice when somehow, some way, the Cardinals beat the Commanders this weekend in just the most week 1 fashion.
That would be tragic.
My RB start of the week, and it's coming from Keegan's matchup, is Raheem Mostert. So the Chargers were a bottom 7.
I almost put this down.
Yes,
I like
it's
it.
a good. It's a solid one. Chargers were a bottom 7 run defense in these categories: rush yards per game, explosive run rate, yards after contact per attempt. That means they're probably not that good of a rush defense. I can't tell you who their linebackers are if you paid me. The Chargers were dead last in yards per carry and success rate against zone running concepts. The Dolphins were the 6th heaviest zone running team in the NFL in 2022 with the 6th best success rate. This is the 2nd highest point total on the slate. We love Devon Achane, but Mostert's a veteran. We just saw Jahmyr Gibbs, who looked like a god, only get, 25% of the snaps. I don't imagine Devon Achane getting more run than that, honestly, at this point. So I think Mostert's going to get used and used heavily in this one. I really like him as a great flex play this week.
Yeah, I definitely love that Mostert thing. It's one of the things that I was trying to point out in that matchup is it'll be very interesting to see how the Chargers respond to the Miami run game. I have one start that I'm not so sure of that I actually want to share with the world because it might be a really bad idea. So I'm going to go with my safety valve start here and go with J.K. Dobbins. I think J.K. Dobbins,
the Texans were so bad against the run last year.
They were so bad.
Most TDs, hey, here's the stat you need. Most TDs to running backs last year. I know they added, Will Anderson, and they've got D'Amico Ryans there. But that's kind of like, how we're saying, like, wait and see. Well, like, wait and see with the Texans defense, before you start deciding against them, right? Like, this is the Ravens, and they have the 2nd highest point total, or projected for the 2nd highest point total on the weekend. I expect them to get busy early and often, and they're probably not going to have to pass that much, if I had to say so. Like, I feel like they could really easily get into a run game script here against the Texans, and Dobbins is fully removed from the injury. He is for sure the lead back there, talent undeniable. Rumors of him potentially being more expanded in the pass role. We'll see that when we believe it. But Dobbins is a great athlete. I think they're going to be in the red zone a ton pretty early on in this game. Wouldn't be surprised to see him punch in a couple and probably break off a couple big explosive runs. So I really like Dobbins this week.
I'm with it. 9-point favorites.
Got me in.
Rookie quarterback at home. The Ravens are unveiling this new offense. I'm here for the hype.
My scary one is Jamal Williams, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Aren't the Titans good?
The Titans are amazing against the run.
I was like, I just remember Jeffrey Simmons and Harold Landry up
first
in
in rushing EPA allowed,
incredible.
2nd versus fantasy running backs last year. This will be a pass funnel game, but if there was a week to start Jamal Williams, you've got 3 weeks until Kamara's back. Kendre Miller is nursing an injury. If you
sure.
went heavy 0 RB and you needed a week, and there was any week to start the gyration god, twerk team himself, Jamal Williams, this would be the week.
We're starting him in Scott Fishbowl.
Yeah. If you're not playing him in like in the first 3 weeks, like why did you draft him?
Yeah.
It kind of just defeats like all of his value.
Yeah. We're starting him in Scott Fishbowl this week, so buckle up, boys. We're rooting for Jamal Williams. Aidan, who are you sitting this week at running back?
Plug your ears, because I already teased it. And it is none only than Alexander Mattison. Welcome to my sit list, Alexander Mattison. Alexander Mattison is going up against what was already a top 5 rushing defense last year. It's pretty much the same entire group. Again, like the front 7 is pretty much the exact same. Looking at the Vikings rush attack last year, like this isn't the priority. This isn't their bread and butter. They had the least amount of rushing attempts, the 6th amount of rushing yards. Like the rushing game is not their juice. Like that's not their juice. I don't think Alexander Mattison is much of this like dual threat 3 down back. And kind of going back to Russell Wilson, like Alexander Mattison, maybe more than anyone, was like the offseason, like darling. Not everyone. A lot of people bought themselves into Alexander Mattison, and I'm going to wait and see. I don't think this is a great matchup for him to start the year. He should get a ton of volume, like if everything we've heard and everything we expect is correct. Ideally, even if he's not efficient, he gets 12 to 16, maybe even more touches. And even that, even if it's, 3-4 yards a touch, like could still be an okay game. But I don't think this is a very good defense to try to prove himself as the Dalvin Cook replacement. I think the odds are stacked against him in terms of what the Vikings like to do as an offense and what the Buccaneers like to stop as a defense. So I'm sitting Madison. I know you guys probably drafted him as your RB2, maybe 3, depending on how you went in your drafts.
Or your 1.
Well, you're a sicko for that one. But no, I'm not playing Madison. I think this is another one where like you kind of need to earn your stripes before you get into my lineup. You probably have a better running back that's going to outscore him this week.
He needs to stumble into the end zone or catch like 4 or 5 balls. That's really the only way he's going to hit. He probably needs to score. 12 to 14 point projection. He'd have to do like what David Montgomery kind of did tonight against that front. Could be a little bit difficult. Yep. But if it's a high scoring game, you got to at least feel decent about it if it's in kind of a shootout environment.
Get into the 5-yard line. Get into the 5.
Very on brand for you to fade Alexander Mattison. I'm incredibly on brand for my fade. Don't start Najee Harris this week.
Hey, I have that too.
Or 4th round.
I have that one too.
You drafted him in the 3rd or 4th round. The 49ers surrendered a league-low 12 fantasy points per game to running backs in 2022. They went and added Javon Hargrave, who's one of the best run stoppers in the NFL. I think this game's going to be pretty low scoring. Could be one of those like game-winning field goal types where it's like 17 to 20, just like a great football game. But I don't know how many touchdowns are going to be scored in this one. The 49ers like to play super slow. I know that the Steelers were playing fast in the preseason, but we also don't know what the split's going to look like with Najee and Jalen Warren. So I just think this is a bad matchup for Najee. You're probably going to have to play him because you drafted him so early.
You have to.
I'd rather like Alexander Mattison like what's the difference between Najee and Madison? Like really, like is it really that different in terms of their setups and where you drafted him and stuff? It's not great.
The worst part about Najee is like we're pretty much like we're on a Najee hangover from last year. Where like he is once again like expensive enough draft capital to where you are playing him. Like you cannot draft a guy in the 3rd round and not play him. So like Najee Harris will be in your lineup. And he might burn you again to start the year, and you're like, "Here I go again. I did not learn my lesson." But no, I'm totally there with you. Najee will get more volume. I think Najee's guaranteed more volume, but I don't know. Like I don't want either one of them near my lineup, and that's why I didn't draft either one of them. So
I came with the backup just in case this happened because I had a feeling somebody else did. In my Najee notes, all I said was, "I don't want any of that 49ers defense." That was the only thing I said. But I
don't
did
want
come with
Javon
a backup.
Hargrave sandwiching me. Yeah, no, thank you.
I have somebody in the similar vein as Madison and Najee a little bit. Another volume play guy, somebody you might have taken if you went light on RB or zero RB. You probably drafted him in the top 5 rounds. He plays in the city of Houston, and his name is Dameon Pierce.
The dog.
And I think this is a awful matchup for him. We're talking about a Ravens defense, the 4th in EPA per play allowed from week 9 and on after the Roquan Swift thing. Like, this is a defense that is going to eat that team alive. All the things that I've said about like Lamar earlier and like how high their team is projected, like second total team projection on the week, the Texans are only projected like 16.5 points. You know, the Dameon Pierce third down usage was encouraging in preseason, so I expect him to be on the field more than he was last year in these situations. But if the Texans are serious about winning the football game, they're going to be down by 2 touchdowns at some point. We're not going to be getting a lot of Dameon Pierce carries. They're going to have to let it go through the air. This game is a terrible matchup for Pierce.
We're talking about Dameon Pierce targets, though. What up?
So if I had to choose one of those 3 fades to start, I'm starting Dameon.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think Damien's going to get the most overall touches, and I think he's going to get... If they're not lying to us this year, Dameon probably catches 4 balls this year. Or not this year,
this game. That would be great. The only thing is the Ravens aren't that incredible of a run-stopping unit, but game script is
They were
not
top 8
great.
versus fantasy running backs last year.
Yeah, but
Sleeper showed a problem.
Sleeper showed it as a green matchup. So that's how
okay.
You know.
Okay, so sleeper, the green matchup. Yeah, copium, smoke the copium. You do that,
Sleeper
brother.
said it's a green matchup. Okay?
Yeah, I'm talking to 2 Dameon Pierce drafters here, I'm sure.
I may be starting Dameon Pierce against Keegan this week. Okay, moving on to wide receivers here. I'll go super quick. I'm going to play to my crowd. A wide receiver that I'm starting this week, Chris Godwin. Played 72% of his snaps. Yes. Played 72% of his snaps in the slot. The Vikings surrendered the seventh most fantasy points per game to slot wide receivers in 2022. This game, 45.5 implied total. I think this is going to be a high volume passing day. Bucks and Godwin could be a major beneficiary of this game script. So I've got the man, the myth, Chris Godwin going off in the slot this week against a kind of putrid secondary facing off in the slot last season. I have a little bit of concern with Brian Flores revamping this defense. And I have a little bit of concern that Keegan has gone and left us. He disappeared. But outside of that, I mean,
you've got his number one fan.
We're keeping this.
You've got his number one fan.
I'm back.
Dude.
Sorry, my pinky's bleeding.
I'm pretty sure I drafted Chris Godwin on all of my redraft teams. This guy only got better as the year went on. Like, ACL fully intact. The dude dominates all levels of the field, especially the short stuff. If you're in a PPR, even half PPR league, Chris Godwin's a beast. Noodle arm Baker, match made in heaven. I love Chris Godwin this year. I love Chris Godwin this week. Give me all the Chris Godwin weeks 1 through 18. Give me all that shit. I love Chris Godwin.
Okay. Keegan, who's your starter wide receiver?
We're having fun with this pick. We're not letting the rookie thing stop us, and we're starting Jordan Addison week 1.
No,
yes, I have him on 4 out of 6 of my redraft teams. We're starting Jordan Addison week 1.
Another guy we're starting for a Scott Fishbowl.
You said 6
guy was in
redraft
the
teams,
lineup.
correct? That was 6 redraft teams, Keegan?
Yeah, 4 out of 6 redraft teams. I got Jordan Addison on it. That's not influencing my position.
How
here.
many I'm in? You do not want to know.
We're starting him because there's a lot of targets to be had without Adam Thielen. I'm not buying the KJ Osborne is ahead of Jordan Addison stuff. They said the same thing about Justin Jefferson being behind on the depth chart. It's week 1 of fantasy. Have some fun. Put the exciting rookie in your lineup and let them feast in this matchup. I'm all in on the Vikings pass catchers this week. Sure, start KJ Osborne too. I almost put him and Jordan Addison on this. Start them both.
So on brand for picking the wide receivers in the matchup. We highlighted. Oh, this is great stuff. Aidan, bring us home. Who's your favorite start at wide receiver this
So
week?
he's not a rookie. He just graduated. He's a second-year player. His wide receiver 1, he's dealing with a toe injury. He might play. He may not.
Go both Manders. You did not go 3 Commanders.
Left hand up. Who are we?
Who are we?
Jahan Dotson, come on down. Even if Terry is healthy, this guy is going to feast. Throughout the entire preseason, Sam Howell has pretty much shown his cards and told us who his favorite target is. It's not Scary Terry.
Say his name.
It is Jahan Dotson.
Wow.
Dotson, baby.
Wow. Got
I'm
him.
fired up. I can't believe I did it. Yeah, I went running back and wide receiver because this defense stinks. All three levels of the field.
I cannot
don't
wait for
care.
the Cardinals to win. This is going to be insane.
I will be probably off the show. I'm off the show. if the Cardinals win, I'm off the show. Jahan Dotson, I don't care, dude. This defense is terrible. That's Sam's favorite target. If Terry goes, we know he's not 100%. Turf toe is one of the most like fugazis in all of fantasy football. Like it just lingers and it's not real, but like they're all kind of hurt. It's
fairy dust. It's magical fairy dust.
It's a woozy. It's a woozy. Yeah, no. Jahan Dotson, boom. I'm going Dotson. I fucking love him this year. I'm calling it right now. Top 20 wide receiver, week 1. Boom. Jahan Dotson.
Wow. Drunk Aidan is getting a 3-year extension. He's getting a 3-year extension with the Regression to the Mean podcast.
That's hard,
for
dude.
sure.
Am I tripping, or did you already suggest Chris Godwin?
I suggested Godwin.
Oh,
Sean.
I was like, wait a minute.
That was when you were bleeding and you got up and left.
Sorry.
I fired him up.
Okay, yeah,
Moving
Aiden just got
on.
so excited. I could have swore he was the one who told me to start him. All right.
Yes. Moving on to wide receivers that I am not starting this week. I'm not starting Gabe Davis. I'm expecting this one to be a slow pace, lower scoring matchup.
Shout out to the
Gabe's-
Jets. Well, lower scoring for the Bills, right?
I'm
Anyone's starting
playing.
Gabe Davis.
I'm playing to my audience here, suggesting Godwin and then fading Gabe Davis. But I think this is going to be a slow-paced game. I think Rodgers is going to do the ball control thing. It's going to be a really fun football game. I think it's going to be similar to what we saw with the Niners and Steelers. Just a good matchup. I think there'll be some fantasy points. But Gabe Davis scored a combined 11 points last year in both of his games against the Jets. The Jets have DJ Reed, Sauce Gardner. Unless you're like Stephon Diggs or an alpha, I don't think I'm going to be starting a lot of wide receivers against the Jets. So the Jets surrendered actually the league least 24 fantasy points per game to wide receivers last season. Their secondary is probably going to be even better this year. So I'm going to fade Gabe Dave. That's an easy one. I'm going to play Gabe Dave in plus matchups, and I'm probably going to fade him in at really negative ones like this. So that's kind of an easy one here. I'm not playing him this week.
The only pass catcher I think you should be starting there is Diggs, obviously, because he's first round draft capital. Like as a Josh Allen owner this week, like you're kind of just like you kind of got a tummy ache because you know like things might not go very well for you. But like because you know you have to do it, and you're like things might go like pretty dark for me. Like
Rush yards.
I might get 12 points from Josh Allen week 1, and I'm gonna be pretty upset. But yeah, no, things could get pretty dark there. If you're starting Gabe Davis, you've got stones like South Park, like in a wheelbarrow, and I'm pretty proud
love
of
it.
you.
I have to choose between him and JSN in another league because Christian Watson's already hurt. So that's gonna be fun. Keegan, who are you benching this week?
This is such a cop out, but just don't start a Cardinals pass catcher this week, please. For the love of God, like don't start Hollywood, don't start Rondale, no Dortch, no McBride, don't start Michael Wilson, Joshua
It would be
Dobbs,
Hollywood.
quarterback.
Hollywood's
one?
is the guy.
Don't
Hollywood's
start
your
Hollywood.
only one that you should even consider. If Rondale or Michael Wilson are even like part of your thought process, I'd like to join your league.
You are in like a 15-man league if you're in that.
I know that's such a cop out. I mean, there's a lot of other there's a lot of wide receivers I really like this weekend. I also have you know what? Just don't start Van Jefferson either. There, I said it. I don't care that he's filling in for Cooper Kupp. Like, I'll give you that'll be my singular sit. Like, don't start any of the Cardinals wide receivers, please. Don't start Van Jefferson either. If you're looking to replace Cooper Kupp with Van Jefferson, something is wrong with the rest of your wide receiver room on your team. I'll say it right now.
Yeah, your draft went wrong.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Aidan, who are you sitting this week?
Shaun, this isn't intentional. This is not intentional the way that I keep going ping pong with you. It's Michael Pittman.
I agree with this one.
Michael Pittman is not in my roster this week. And I think I've got a good claim to this. So we're looking at a Colts offense that I don't think is going to pass very much. Like we're projecting similar to the 2022 Bears offense. Like it might be a little worse, a little better. But when you look at like how that ended up for pass catchers in that offense, granted there were some injuries, it was dark, man. It was rare that you started a Bears pass catcher last year and you came out like feeling good about it. Like if you got 10 from Mooney last year, you were victory lapping in the streets. And
It was Cole Kmet. It was just Kmet season.
I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know. For that reason, like
You're out.
I'm out, dude. I don't know what's gonna happen with this. Like, welcome back to my wait and see segment. You are back on the pine for now, Michael Pittman, because I have no idea what is going to happen in this Colts offense, aside from Anthony Richardson just going berserk on the ground. So, Michael Pittman, welcome to the pine.
You noticed that every stat that I called out for the Colts this week was rushing quarterback stats. It was not passing stats. That was intentional.
Richardson's okay, but his pass catchers, yucky.
Yeah. We'll see. Okay, moving really quickly because we're almost at an hour here. Tight ends, very quickly. I'm
Quick.
starting Tyler Higbee this week.
Boom.
Death
I
taxes.
Boom.
Okay, all three of us.
Clean
so triple.
sweep. Clean
Okay.
sweep.
Oh, also
Death taxes.
Kyle Pitts, by the way, too. We're starting Kyle Pitts and Tyler Higbee this week. That's what we're doing.
Okay.
I'm not starting Kyle Pitts this week.
Darren Waller. Darren Waller's
Waller.
also got kind of a fire matchup
I'm
this
warm.
week. But
I'm warm.
death, taxes, and tight ends torching the Seahawks. Tight ends have averaged 15 fantasy points per game to the Seahawks last year, second highest.
You say
in
15?
15. In
Points a game?
2021, yes. In 2021, they gave up the
That's
seventh
high.
highest points per game, 11 points per game. And then in 2020, they gave up 11 fantasy points per game, which was fifth highest. So they've been like notoriously terrible at giving up.
We had that.
points
We
to
had that pretty
tight
dialed
ends.
in last year too, Sean. Like almost
Yeah, we
every
were just-
start sit segment, we
Yeah.
were just like, okay, who's playing the Seahawks this week? Like, let it rip. And it paid
Bobby
dividends.
Wagner's back. Bobby Wagner's back, but he was there in 2020 and 2021, so it's not like it's
And
insane.
I'm probably still doing it even if Cup's there. He's probably still seeing 6 to 8 targets with Cup. He's probably now seeing double-digit targets without Cup. Like, hammer that one.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, Higbee saw the fourth highest target percentage of any tight end in 2022. He honestly could get 12 targets. you might be looking at like an 8 for 80 game from Higbee.
Easy.
It's pretty easy. A tight end that I'm sitting this week is Dalton Schultz. Ravens have
Wow.
been consistently solid against tight end. They're missing 4 starting linemen.
No, I'm cool with that.
Rookie making his first career start in Baltimore on the road. Could that be a rougher place to make your career debut in Baltimore?
Would not be stoked.
And Texans are like 10-point dogs. I'm good off Schultz. I don't. That's not a start
I'm
for me.
also sitting Dalton Schultz this week for the exact same reasons you said. They're going to have to pass the ball a ton, and they'll be down a ton. That doesn't mean that it's going to look good. CJ Stroud, first game of his NFL career, first regular season game. I'm also out on that.
That's why they're leaning on the dog, baby. That's why
There you
Damien's
go.
getting 30 touches. Okay,
Yeah.
Aidan, who you benching?
So I'm not biased. I will even fade. I will even fade the own pack, and I'm fading Cole Kmet this week. We are fading.
Oh, I thought you were
Cole.
fading Luke Musgrave. I was
No,
like, oh my
no,
goodness, that's
no.
so good.
Like I've told the listeners, man, I know when to fade my own people. Over 6 meetings against the Packers, how many points do you think Cole Kmet has averaged?
Like
3.
5.
6 points per game against the Green Bay Packers. It's pretty fucking
Devondre
dark,
Campbell.
Dude. It's pretty dark. Not to mention Bobby Trees is in the mix. We don't know if this Bears offense, or passing offense rather, we don't know how much better they're going to be, and even how much of a role Cole Kmet plays. When you look at it, Cole Kmet is actually one of the best like blockers as a tight end in the league. Bobby Trees is the more like natural pass catching tight end. I don't know what that split looks like
Are you
yet.
calling Bobby Tanyan Bobby Trees?
Bobby Tanyan, yeah,
Big
Bobby
Bob
T.
Tanyan. Oh,
Yep.
Bobby Trees. That was throwing me
My
for a
bad.
loop. Okay, so
No.
you're talking about Big Bob Tanyan here. Okay.
Big Bob T, yeah, Bobby T, Bobby T,
Okay.
Bobby
Bobby
T.
T.
I
I was like,
gave him the
what?
extra
Robert
R-E-E-S. No,
You just
Yeah,
got
that's
excited.
what I was
It's
thinking.
okay. You're
Bobby
fading
T.
him. It's good. Stuff happens when
Bobby
you fade.
T. I just think there's way too much of a mystery, and you probably spent a little more draft capital than you would have liked on Cole Kmet. Like, just toss him on the bench and just go stream a guy. I don't know.
Nothing like fading this week's 25th ranked tight end.
Cole? No, he's not. No, he's not. He got he got drafted as like tight end 10. There's no way. Is he ranked that low this week?
Dude, he's pretty down there low. Like,
Dude, I think I might not start Jameis Winston this week. I don't know how you'll do it.
Yeah, it's like saying the same thing.
In terms of your draft capital, though, Cole Kmet was not drafted.
Cole Kmet, they probably are starting him, right? Like somebody drafted him as their starting tight end. Keegan, you know.
Keegan. God damn it, Keegan. I'm gonna have to pour another whiskey. You fucked me up on that one, Keegan. He was drafted high enough to where you're probably starting him. Whatever, dude. Whatever,
Wow, that's
Keegan.
crazy disrespect.
I should kick his butt.
Okay, so going through this again.
Rapid fire.
Going through this again, we, as a collective unit, we are starting Anthony Richardson. We are starting, who did you guys want at quarterback this week?
Geno.
It was Geno and Anthony Richardson. At running back, we had Raheem Mostert. Who else did we have at running back?
All
J.K.
of
Dobbins.
Washington. All of Washington.
And all of Washington. At wide receiver,
DC.
we had Chris Godwin. Who else did we have at wide receiver?
Jordan Addison.
Dotson and Jordan Addison. And then we all had Tyler Higbee.
Yep.
We are fading Deshaun Watson and Keegan. Who did you fade?
Russell Wilson. Wow, I totally
Russell
forgot.
Wilson.
I'm still thinking about the Cole thing.
We were fading Najee Harris and Alexander Madison. Gabe Davis wasn't in the lineup. Who else were we fading at wide receiver here? We had Michael Pittman and Keegan. Who'd you have?
All Arizona pass catchers. We're fading all of them.
And Vanny, Jeff, and then we were out on Dalton Schultz and Cole Kmet. Why trees?
Yo, why are you guys saying it like that? I'm off the show.
This Sunday, we have Scott Hansen coming into our lives. We have 7 hours of commercial-free football. We have Niners, Jets, and Steelers football. It is going to be some amazing stuff. Before we jump, Keegan, what do you have to say to the listeners?
I mean, this is exciting. We're in year 2 of regression to the mean, covering the official NFL regular season, year 2. This is week 1. Aidan's making his first debut on the week previews and joining us for regular season content. It's like Christmas, dude. I feel
It's
good.
like Christmas.
I hope the listeners are excited, and I hope they're ready for another good year because it's just gonna get better. And surely I won't get hurt on Monday night. Surely I won't get hurt.
I won't know because we're.
I won't be on the show this
Sunday
weekend
night.
if the Bears lose. I won't be on the show. I won't.
No, that's what you got to do. You got to show up, dude. It's the worst part. You got to show up no matter what.
Face the music.
You got to. You got to. When
having
you start
nightmares
Sky
all
Moore
week.
and he scores 0.4 points, you got to hop on a
Nightmares
podcast.
all week, man. I don't know if I can do it.
Until next time, everybody.